Chapter 8. Port Angeles. Jess drove faster than the chief, so we made it to Port Angeles by 4. It had been a while since I'd had a girls' night out, and the estrogen rush was invigorating. We listened to whiny rock songs while Jessica jabbered on about the boys we hung out with. Jessica's dinner with Mike had gone very well, and she was hoping that by Saturday night they would have progressed to the first kiss stage. I know, such a high school.
The first kiss phase.
Port Angeles was a beautiful little tourist trap, much more polished and quaint than Forks. Jess drove straight to the one big department store in town. Both Jessica and Angela seemed surprised and almost disbelieving when I told them I'd never been to a dance in Phoenix. "Didn't you ever go with a boyfriend or something?" Jess asked dubiously as we walked through the front doors of the store. "Really," I tried to convince her, not wanting to confess my dancing problems. "I've never had a boyfriend or anything close." "Why not?" Jessica demanded. "No one asked me," I answered honestly. She looked skeptical. "People ask you here," she reminded me, "and you tell them no." We were in the junior section now, scanning the racks for dress-up clothes. "Well, except for Tyler," Angela amended quietly. "Excuse me?" I gasped. "What did you say?" "Tyler told everyone he's taking you to prom." "He said what?" I sounded
boys.
joking. "Tyler!"
Tyler, you're being a real douche. You can't claim somebody.
"I told you it wasn't true," Angela murmured to Jessica. "That's why Lauren doesn't like you," Jessica giggled while we pawed through the clothes. I ground my teeth. "Do you think that if I ran him over with my truck, he would stop feeling guilty about the accident? That he might give up on making amends and just call it even?" "Maybe," Jess snickered, "if that's why he's doing this." The dress selection wasn't large, but both of them found a few things to try on. Jess was torn between two. One a long, strapless, basic black number. The other a knee-length electric blue with spaghetti straps. I encouraged her to go with the blue. Why not play up the eyes? Angela chose a pale pink dress that draped around her tall frame nicely and brought out honey tints in her light brown hair. I complimented them both generously and helped by returning the rejects to their racks. Angela?" She looked up curiously. "Is it normal for the Cullens," I kept my eyes on the shoes, "to be out of school a lot?" I failed miserably in my attempt to sound nonchalant. "Yes, when the weather is good, they go backpacking all the time. Even the doctor. They're all real outdoorsy," she told me quietly, examining her shoes too. She didn't ask one question, let alone the hundreds that Jessica would have unleashed. I was beginning to really like Angela. Just feel like...
I know.
We planned to go to dinner at a little Italian restaurant on the boardwalk, but the dress shopping hadn't taken as long as we'd expected. Jess and Angela were going to take their clothes back to the car and then walk down to the bay. I told them I would meet them at the restaurant in an hour. I wanted to look for a bookstore. They were both willing to come with me, but I encouraged them to go have fun. I had no trouble finding the bookstore, but it wasn't what I was looking for. The windows were full of crystals, dream catchers, and books about spiritual healing. I didn't even go inside. There had to be a normal bookstore in town.
Sorry, but if she's looking for like these vampire books, she's not really looking for a normal bookstore.
That's a good point. I don't think they have that in like a nonfiction.
Oh. Puppy. This is Jack. Hello.
Definitely, she's not looking for a normal bookstore.
Like she's not just looking for like a version of Twilight. She's looking for actual mythology books. You'd probably be better off in the one that's about like spiritual stuff, you know?
One of my friends or whatever, she's just started her own like tarot business. She added things like, if you book a reading in 24 hours, I'll give you a $5 Starbucks gift card. So now part of me is like,
to be fair, that'll only buy you like one venti drink.
But it would be free.
It would be.
I meandered through the streets, which were filling up with end of the workday traffic, and hoped I was headed toward downtown. I wasn't paying as much attention as I should to where I was going. I started to realize as I crossed another road that I was going the wrong direction. I decided to turn east at the next corner and then loop around after a few blocks and try my luck on a different street on my way back to the boardwalk. Or you could just literally pivot and turn around.
She can only walk in one direction.
A group of 4 men turned around the corner I was heading for, dressed too casually to be heading home from the office, but they were too grimy to be tourists. "Hey there," one of them called as they passed, and he had to be talking to me since no one else was around. The closest, a heavy-set, dark-haired man in his early 20s, seemed to be the one who had spoken. He was wearing a flannel shirt open over a dirty t-shirt, cut-off jeans, and sandals. Ugh. Sandals.
Sounds cute.
He He took half a step toward me. "Hello," I mumbled, a knee-jerk reaction. "You fool!" I could hear them laughing at full volume behind me. "Hey, wait!" one of them called after me again, but I kept my head down and rounded the corner with a sigh of relief.
This really is just one of the worst experiences, though. Like, I hate when I'm anywhere and it's like a group of guys, like 3 guys, it's just like, hey, you know you want to smile. So, come on, smile.
Like, that's when you have to be secretly a vampire so that when you turn and smile at them, your fangs, like, come out.
Yeah.
And you're like, "Woo!" The sky suddenly darkened further, and as I looked over my shoulder to glare at the offending cloud, I realized with a shock that 2 men were walking quietly 20 feet behind me. They were from the same group I passed at the corner. I turned my head forward at once, quickening my pace. A chill that had nothing to do with the weather made me shiver again. I listened intently to their quiet footsteps, which were much too quiet when compared to the boisterous noise they'd been making earlier, and it didn't sound like they were speeding up or getting any closer to me. Breathe, I had to remind myself. You don't know they're following you. I reached the corner, but a swift glance revealed that it was only a blind drive to the back of another building. I had to hurriedly correct and dash across the narrow drive. I concentrated on the faint footsteps behind me, deciding whether or not to run. It seemed to take forever for me to get to the corner. I kept my pace steady, the men behind me falling ever so slightly farther behind with every step. I skipped around the corner with a grateful sigh and skidded to a stop. Because lounging against the western building, midway down the street, were the other 2 men from the group, both watching with excited smiles as I froze dead on the sidewalk. I realized then that I wasn't being followed. I was being herded. "There you are!" The booming voice of the stocky, dark-haired man shattered the intense quiet and made me jump. The thick-set man shrugged away from the wall as I wearily came to a stop and walked slowly into the street. "Stay away from me," I warned in a voice that was supposed to sound strong and fearless. "Don't be like that, sugar," he called, and the raucous laughter started again behind me. I braced myself, feet apart, trying to remember through my panic what little self-defense I knew. Headlights suddenly flew around the corner, the car almost hitting the stocky one, forcing him to jump back toward the sidewalk. I dove into the road. This car was going to stop, or have to hit me. But the silver car unexpectedly fishtailed around, skidding to a stop with the passenger's door open just a few feet from me. "Get in," a furious voice commanded. It was amazing how instantaneously the choking fear vanished, amazing how suddenly the feeling of security washed over me. The tires squealed as he spun around to face north, accelerating too quickly, swerving toward the stunned men on the street. I stared at his face in profound relief that went beyond my sudden deliverance. I studied his flawless features in the limited light, waiting for my breath to return to normal, until it occurred to me that his expression was murderously angry. "Are you okay?" I asked, surprised at how hoarse my voice sounded. "No," he said curtly, and his tone was livid. "Bella?" he asked, his voice tight, controlled. "Yes?" My voice was still rough. I tried to clear my throat quietly. "Are you all right?" He still didn't look at me, but the fury was plain on his face. "Yes," I croaked softly. "Distract me, please," he ordered. "Just prattle about something unimportant until I calm down," he clarified, closing his eyes and pinching the bridge of his nose with his thumb and forefinger. I racked my brain for something trivial. "I'm gonna run over Tyler Crowley tomorrow before school?" He was still squeezing his eyes closed, but the corner of his mouth twitched. "Why?" "He's telling everyone that he's taking me to prom. Either he's insane, or he's still trying to make up for almost killing me last. Well, you remember it, and he thinks prom is somehow the correct way to do this. So I figure if I endanger his life, then we're even, and he can't keep trying to make amends." I heard about that. He sounded a bit more composed. "You did?" I asked in disbelief, my previous irritation flaring. "If he's paralyzed from the neck down, he can't go to prom either," I muttered. Edward sighed and finally opened his eyes. "Better?" "Not really." "What's wrong?" My voice came out in a whisper. "Sometimes I have a problem with my temper, Bella." He was whispering too, and as he stared out the window, his eyes narrowed into slits. We sat in silence again. I glanced at the clock on the dashboard. It was past 6:30. Jessica and Angela will be murmured. Jessica and Angela will be worried, I murmured. I was supposed to meet them. He started the engine without another word, turning around smoothly and speeding back toward town. He parallel parked against the curb in a space I would have thought much too small for the Volvo. I looked out the window to see the lights of La Bella Italia, and Jess and Angela were leaving, pacing anxiously away from us. I heard the door open and turned to see him getting out. "What are you doing?" I asked. "I'm taking you to dinner." He smiled slightly, but his eyes were hard. He stepped out of the car and slammed the door. I fumbled with my seatbelt and then hurried to get out of the car as well. "Jess! Angela!" I yelled after them, waving when I turned. They rushed back to me, the pronounced relief on both their faces simultaneously changing to surprise as I saw who I was standing next to. Where have you been? Jessica's voice was suspicious. I got lost, I admitted sheepishly. And then I ran into Edward. Would it be all right if I joined you? He asked in his silken, irresistible voice. Actually, Bella, we already ate while we were waiting. Sorry, Angela confessed. That's the worst.
We already ate and we just didn't care that you were missing.
Yeah, like
because I know
you had a pre-agreed upon arrangement for where and when to meet. You know this girl's in a strange city all by herself, and you're like, she doesn't show up, and they're just like, meh, that's fine. I'm not hungry, I shrugged. I think you should eat something. Edward's voice was low, but full of authority. He looked up at Jessica and spoke slightly louder. Do you mind if I drive Bella home tonight? That way you won't have to wait while she eats. No problem, I guess. She bit her lip, trying to figure out from my expression whether that was what I wanted. I winked at her. I wanted nothing more than to be alone with my perpetual savior. There were so many questions that I couldn't bombard him with till we were by ourselves.
Bella, I'm so confused by her social skills.
She has these weird mood swings. It's like, what is your personality?
He is obviously stalking her. And,
Yeah.
And she's like, I couldn't wait to be alone with him. What?
The restaurant wasn't crowded. It was the off-season in Port Angeles. The host was female, and I understood the look in her eyes as she assessed Edward. She welcomed him a little more warmly than necessary. A table for two? I did that the wrong one. A table for two? I was reading the hostess.
A table for two?
A table for two? His voice was alluring, whether he was aiming for that or not. She led us to a table big enough for four in the center of the most crowded area of the dining floor. Perhaps something more private, he insisted quietly to the host. Sure, she sounded as surprised as I was. She turned and led us around a partition to a small ring of booths, all of them empty. How's this? Perfect. He flashed his gleaming smile, dazing her momentarily. She shook her head, blinking. Your server will be right out. She walked away unsteadily. You really shouldn't do that to people, I criticized. It's hardly fair. Do what? Dazzle them like that. She's probably hyperventilating in the kitchen right now. He seemed confused. I dazzle people? You haven't noticed? Do you think everybody gets their way so easily? Do I dazzle you? Frequently, I admitted.
This is too much.
Just for some reason makes me feel like it's from a Disney show. And then our server arrived, her face expectant. The hostess had definitely dished behind the scenes, and this new girl didn't look disappointed. Hello, my name's Amber, and I'll be your server tonight. What can I get you to drink? I didn't miss that she was speaking only to him. He looked at me. I'll have a Coke? 2 Cokes, he said. I'll be right back with that, she assured him with another unnecessary smile. What? I asked when she left. His eyes stayed fixed on my face. How are you feeling? I'm fine, I replied, surprised by his intensity. He chuckled at my puzzled tone. Well, I'm actually waiting for you to go into shock. I don't think that will happen, I said, after I could breathe again. I've always been very good at repressing unpleasant things. Just the same, I'll feel better when you have some sugar and food in you. Right on cue, the waitress appeared with our drinks and a basket of breadsticks. Are you ready to order? She asked Edward. Bella? He asked. She turned unwillingly toward me. I picked the first thing I saw on the menu. I'll have the mushroom ravioli. She turned back to him with a smile. Nothing for me, he said. Of course not. Let me know if you change your mind. The coy smile was still in place, but he wasn't looking at her, and she left dissatisfied. Drink, he ordered. I sipped at my soda obediently, and then drank more deeply, surprised by how thirsty I was. I realized I had finished the whole thing when he pushed his glass toward me.
Girl's about to burp like a lot.
Yeah, if she was a normal human, 100% also gonna have to pee real bad on the drive back. Like, by the time they're driving back, she has to be, like, bouncing that knee, like, oh! Thanks, I muttered, still thirsty. The cold from the icy soda was radiating through my chest, and I shivered. Are you cold? It's just the Coke, I explained, shivering again. Don't you have a jacket? His voice was disapproving. Yes? I looked at the empty bench next to me. Oh, I left it in Jessica's car, I realized. Edward was shrugging out of his jacket. Underneath, he wore an ivory turtleneck sweater. It fit him snugly, emphasizing how muscular his chest was.
Wait, man is wearing an ivory turtleneck sweater? That's such a power outfit. Oh.
You have to be like a model, very confident to pull that off. He handed me the jacket, interrupting my ogling. I shivered again. It smelled amazing. He pushed the breadbasket toward me. He stared into my eyes, and I saw how light his eyes were, lighter than I'd ever seen them, golden butterscotch. I picked up a breadstick and began nibbling on the end, measuring his expression. Usually you're in a better mood when your eyes are so light, I commented, trying to distract him from whatever thought had left him frowning and somber. He stared at me stunned. You're always crabbier when your eyes are black. I expected then, I went on. I have a theory about that. His eyes narrowed. More theories? I hope you're more creative this time, or are you still stealing from comic books? But then the waitress strode around the partition with my food. I realized we'd been unconsciously leaning toward each other across the table because we both straightened up as she approached. She set the dish in front of me. It looked pretty good, and turned quickly to Edward. Did you change your mind? She asked. Isn't there anything I can get you? I may have been imagining the double meaning in her words. Why are you in Port Angeles? He looked down, folding his large hands together slowly on the table. His eyes flickered up at me from under his lashes, the hint of a smirk on his face.
Does he have soccer?
He just chuckles and looks under his eyelashes.
Yeah.
Next. But that's the easiest one, I objected. Next, he repeated. Okay, then. I glared at him and continued slowly. Let's say, hypothetically, of course, that someone could know what people are thinking. Read minds, you know, with a few exceptions. Just one exception, he corrected. Hypothetically. How does that work? What are the limitations? How would that someone find someone else at exactly the right time? How would he know she was in trouble? Hypothetically, he asked. Sure. Well, if that someone, let's call him Joe, I suggested. Joe, that.
Another stalker.
Shall we call you Jane? How did you know? I asked, unable to curb my intensity. I realized I was leaning toward him again. He seemed to be wavering, torn by some internal dilemma. You can trust me, you know, I murmured. I reached forward, without thinking, to touch his folded hands, but he slipped them away minutely, and I pulled my hands back. Oh, uncomfortable.
Awkward.
I don't know if I have a choice anymore. His voice was almost a whisper. I was wrong. You're much more observant than I gave you credit for. I was wrong about you on one other thing as well. You're not a magnet for accidents. That's not a broad enough classification. You're a magnet for trouble. If there is anything dangerous within 10-mile radius, it will invariably find you. And you put yourself into that category, I guessed? His face turned cold, expressionless, unequivocally. I stretched my hand across the table again, ignoring him when he pulled back slightly once more, to touch the back of his hand shyly with my fingertips. His skin was cold and hard like stone. I'm sorry, that's just so like, I must touch you. So it's like, I just imagine him going like, no, 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 no. And she's like, yes, 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 yes.
Consent, Bella.
No, Bella. He moved his hand out from under mine, placing both of his under the table. But he
She's
leaned.
gonna reach under the table.
Oh my god, this is awkward.
She's gonna start like playing footsies under the table. I followed you to Port Angeles, he admitted, speaking in a rush. I've never tried to keep a specific person alive before, and it's much more troublesome than I would have believed. I wondered if it should bother me that he was following me. Instead,
Yes?
What? Instead, I felt a strange surge of pleasure.
Because you already have developed Stockholm Syndrome.
100%. Did you ever think that maybe my number was up the first time with the van and that you've been interfering with fate? I speculated, distracting myself. That wasn't the first time, he said. Your number was up the first time I met you.
How creepy is that? I'd be like, this person's going to murder me.
Yeah, this is not.
So my number was up when you met me because you're going to kill me, right?
By the time he looked up to read my eyes, there was no trace of fear in them. You remember? He asked, his angel's face grave. Yes, I was calm. And yet here you sit. Yes, here I sit because of you. I paused. Because somehow you knew how to find me today? I prompted. His eyes flashed down to my full plate and then back to me. You eat, I'll talk, he bargained. I quickly scooped up another ravioli and popped it in my mouth. It's harder than it should be, keeping track of you. Usually I can find someone very easily once I've heard their mind before. I made myself swallow, then stabbed another ravioli and
That's
popped.
so sketchy. That is so sketchy.
I was keeping tabs on Jessica, not carefully. Like I said, only you could find trouble in Port Angeles. And at first, I didn't notice when you took off on your own. Then when I realized that you weren't with her anymore, I went looking for you at the bookstore I saw in her head. I could tell that you hadn't gone in and that you'd gone south. So I was just waiting for you, randomly searching through the thoughts of people on the street to see if anyone had noticed you so I would know where you were. I had no reason to be worried, but I was strangely anxious. The sun was finally setting and I was about to get out and follow you on foot, and then he stopped, clenching his teeth together in sudden fury. He made an effort to calm himself. I heard what they were thinking, he growled, his upper lip curling slightly back over his teeth. I saw your face in his mind. It was very hard. You can't imagine how hard for me to simply take you away and leave them alive.
Serial killer.
I could have let you go with Jessica and Angela, but I was afraid if you left me alone, I would go looking for them, he admitted in a whisper.
He ever gets caught for a crime, he's putting her in a very bad
He
position.
literally just said he wanted to kill them, and then he reads people's minds.
Yeah,
And
like,
she's like-
if you ever leave me, I might run off and kill somebody. I don't know.
Finally, he looked up, his eyes seeking mine, full of his own questions. Are you ready to go home, he asked. I'm ready to leave, I qualified, overly grateful that we had the hour-long ride home together. I wasn't ready to say goodbye to him. The waitress appeared as if she'd been called, or watching. How are we doing, she asked Edward. We're ready for the check, thank you. Here you go. She pulled a small leather folder from the front pocket of her black apron and handed it to him. There was a bill in his hand already. He slipped it into the folder and handed it right back to her. No change. He smiled, then he stood up, and I scrambled awkwardly to my feet. He walked close beside me to the door, still careful not to touch me. I remembered what Jessica had said about her relationship with Mike, how they were almost to the first kiss stage. Edward seemed to hear me, and he looked down curiously. I looked at the sidewalk, grateful that he didn't seem to be able to know what I was thinking. He opened the passenger door, holding it for me as I stepped in, shutting it softly behind me. I watched him walk around the front of the car, amazed, yet again, by how graceful he was. Once inside the car, he started the engine and turned the heater on high. It had gotten very cold. I was warm in his jacket, though, breathing in the scent of it when I thought he couldn't see. Edward pulled out through the traffic, apparently without a glance, flipping around to head toward the freeway. Now he said significantly, "It's your turn." It's funny though, because she thinks he can't see like her sniffing his jacket, but he can hear it because he's a vampire. So this whole time, even though she doesn't know, he's like chuckling because he can hear her going.
Smells so good.
I hate so much how he's like, I can hear minds, I wanted to kill people, and she's like, first kiss.
Rereading it now, it's not hard to see how E.L. James came up with the 50 Shades guy.
Yeah, there's a lot of like, I was thinking about that where he's like, eat, do this, do that, and she's like,
Very commanding and very unhealthy possessive behavior. I see it a lot more clearly now.
I know. I feel like when I read this, like the first time when I was probably more the target age range, I was much more just like swooning along with Bella, I think.
Like slightly skim reading because I just wanted to
Yeah.
see what happened with their relationship. So it's
Yeah, I was
like
like-
you're not reading it word for word.
Yeah, I did not catch this.
Yeah, now like going back, I'm like older and also paying more attention, and I'm just like, oh.
Hey.